Hello, and welcome to Artificial Fluency. I'm your host, John, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Emma. Today, we're exploring a fun and engaging way to practice English through toy games and play activities.
That's right, John. While we often focus on traditional learning methods like reading books or watching movies, toy games provide a unique and interactive way to build vocabulary, practice conversation, and even learn cultural aspects of English-speaking countries.
Exactly. Whether you're a parent looking to help your child learn English, a teacher searching for classroom activities, or even an adult learner wanting a more playful approach to language practice, today's episode will give you practical ideas to make learning more engaging.
Let's start by talking about why toy games are so effective for language learning. What makes them special compared to other methods?
I think one of the biggest advantages is that games create a context where language becomes necessary for a purpose. When you're playing, you're not just memorizing vocabulary, you're using it to accomplish something, which helps it stick in your memory.
Absolutely. Games also reduce the anxiety that can come with language learning. When you're having fun, you're less worried about making mistakes, which creates an ideal environment for learning. The emotional connection to play activities makes the language more memorable too.
And let's not forget how games naturally create repetition. You might say the same phrases over and over during a game, but because it's in a fun context, it doesn't feel like drilling, it feels like playing.
Let's dive into some specific types of toy games and how they can help with different aspects of English learning. Board games are a great place to start, aren't they?
Definitely. Classic board games like Scrabble are perfect for vocabulary building. Players have to create words from random letters, which challenges them to recall and use English words strategically.
And Pictionary is wonderful for practicing descriptive language. When you're trying to guess what someone is drawing, you need to use adjectives, comparisons, and question forms, all valuable language skills.
For younger learners, Candyland or Chutes and Ladders can teach basic directional vocabulary, forward, backward, up, down, along with numbers and colors, all while having fun.
Don't forget Monopoly, which introduces financial vocabulary, property concepts, and lots of negotiation language. I'll Trade You Park Place for Two Railroads is a perfect example of conditional structures in natural use.
Now, what about card games? They're portable and usually less expensive than board games.
Card games are excellent. Go Fish is perfect for practicing question formation. Do you have any sevens? It also teaches numbers and turn-taking phrases like, it's your turn, or go ahead.
Uno is another great option that teaches colors and numbers, plus common game phrases like draw two, skip, and reverse. The gameplay is simple enough that learners can focus on the language rather than complex rules.
For more advanced learners, games like Apples to Apples help with understanding adjectives, nouns, and even cultural references and humor, which can be one of the trickiest parts of mastering a language.
Let's talk about classic childhood toys that aren't necessarily games, but still offer rich language learning opportunities.
Building blocks and construction toys like Lego are fantastic for spatial vocabulary. Children learn words like on top of, underneath, beside, and between as they build structures. These prepositions are essential for describing location in English.
And the imagination play that comes with these toys encourages narrative building, telling stories about what you've created, which practices verb tenses, descriptive language, and dialogue.
Role-playing toys like doll houses, action figures, or play kitchens are incredible for conversational practice. Children naturally create dialogues between characters, practicing questions, answers, and social language.
I've seen teachers use play kitchens to teach food vocabulary, cooking verbs like stir, chop, and bake, and restaurant phrases like may I take your order? It's a fun way to simulate real-world language use.
Let's not forget about outdoor and active games, which are perfect for teaching action verbs and commands.
Games like Simon Says directly practice imperative forms. Simon says, touch your nose. Players have to understand and respond to instructions quickly, which builds listening comprehension along with vocabulary for body parts and actions.
Tag, hide and seek, and other playground games teach phrases like, you're it, ready or not, here I come, and home free. These are authentic expressions that English-speaking children use every day.
Now let's talk about digital toy games, which have become increasingly popular and offer some unique benefits for language learners.
Apps like Toca Boca create virtual playrooms where children can engage with different scenarios: hospitals, schools, cooking, all with associated vocabulary. The visual nature of these apps helps connect words directly to concepts.
And many educational games like Endless Alphabet or Duolingo Kids blend play with explicit language instruction, combining the benefits of both approaches.
For older learners, simulation games like The Sims or Animal Crossing offer immersive environments where players have to interact in English to progress, building both vocabulary and reading skills.
Let's talk about how parents, teachers, or adult learners can maximize the language benefits of toy games. What strategies would you recommend?
One approach is to intentionally narrate what's happening during play. For example, when playing with building blocks, you might say, "I'm putting the red block on top of the blue one. Now I need a small green piece to go beside it." This provides rich input with contextual clues.
Asking open-ended questions during play is another great strategy. Instead of, "Do you like this toy?" try, "What do you think will happen if we put this piece here?" Or, "How could we make this tower taller?" These questions encourage longer, more complex answers.
For teachers, setting up different game stations where students rotate in small groups creates opportunities for varied language practice. Each station can focus on different vocabulary or language functions.
And don't forget about adapting familiar games to focus on specific language goals. For instance, you could play Jenga, but write vocabulary words, questions, or prompts on each block. When players remove a block, they have to use that word in a sentence or answer the question.
For adult learners, joining game nights or board game clubs can be a low-pressure way to practice English in a social setting. Many cities have international board game meetups specifically designed for language exchange.
Or adults can revisit children's games with the explicit goal of building vocabulary. Even something as simple as tic-tac-toe can be modified by requiring players to name a word in a certain category before placing their X or O.
Another tip is to maintain a vocabulary journal based on gameplay. After playing, write down new words or phrases you encountered, especially those that were useful or appeared multiple times.
Let's wrap up with some specific toy game recommendations for different proficiency levels. For beginners, what would you suggest?
For absolute beginners, I'd recommend matching games or simple memory games with pictures and words. Games like Spot It or Simple Picture Dominoes help build basic vocabulary with visual support.
Candyland is great for beginners too. It teaches colors, counting, and basic directional language without requiring much speaking at first.
For intermediate learners, games with more interaction like Guess Who are perfect. Players have to form questions. Does your person have glasses? Is your person wearing a hat? This practices question formation and descriptive language.
And Categories works well for intermediate to advanced learners. It challenges players to think of words in specific categories that start with a given letter, which expands vocabulary and encourages creative thinking in English.
For advanced learners, games that involve storytelling or explaining concepts, like Taboo or Dixit, push language skills further. These games require circumlocution, finding alternative ways to express ideas when you can't use certain words.
And don't forget classic word games like Boggle or Bananagrams for advanced vocabulary building. These games reward players with larger English vocabularies while still being fun and competitive.
One final thought. Regardless of which games you choose, the most important thing is to keep the experience enjoyable. The moment it starts feeling like a chore rather than play, much of the language benefit is lost.
Great point, Emma. Language learning should be fun, and toy games provide the perfect opportunity to learn while playing. Remember, you're not just playing games, you're building language skills in a natural, engaging way.
And for parents or teachers listening, don't worry about getting everything perfect. The simple act of playing these games in English creates valuable language exposure and practice.
That brings us to the end of today's episode of Artificial Fluency. We hope you found some inspiration for incorporating toy games into your English learning or teaching.
Thank you for listening. If you have favorite games you use for language learning, we'd love to hear about them. Until next time, happy playing and happy learning.
Goodbye, everyone. Hello, and welcome to Artificial Fluency. I'm your host, John, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Emma. Today we're diving into a topic many of our listeners have been requesting: how to learn English fast.
That's right, John. In our busy world, many learners are looking for effective ways to accelerate their English acquisition. Today, we'll share evidence-based strategies that can help you make rapid progress without cutting corners on quality.
I love this topic because there's so much misconception out there. Many companies promise fluency in 30 days, which just isn't realistic. But there are genuine ways to optimize your learning process for faster results.
Before we get into specific strategies, let's address what fast really means in language learning, because expectations matter.
Great starting point. Learning any language is a significant undertaking, and English, with its notoriously inconsistent spelling and vast vocabulary, presents unique challenges. Even with the most efficient methods, achieving genuine fluency takes consistent effort over time.
Exactly. When we talk about learning English fast, we're really talking about optimizing your learning process to make the most efficient progress possible. Think of it as taking the express train rather than the local. You'll still need to travel the distance, but you'll make fewer unnecessary stops.
That's a helpful metaphor. So let's break down what makes learning efficient versus inefficient. Many learners waste time with approaches that feel productive, but don't yield proportional results.
Another key point is that fast looks different depending on your starting point and goals. A beginner aiming for basic conversational ability has a different journey than an intermediate learner preparing for an academic exam.
And let's not forget that consistency beats intensity. Studying English for 30 minutes daily will generally yield better results than cramming for 5 hours once a week, even though the total hours are fewer.
Absolutely. With those foundations in mind, let's talk about the core principles of accelerated language learning, starting with what research tells us about optimizing the process.
The first principle is high-frequency, comprehensible input. Research consistently shows that extensive exposure to language you can mostly understand is crucial for rapid acquisition.
That's why immersion is so powerful. When you're constantly surrounded by English that's just slightly above your level, what linguists call I+1, your brain naturally begins to extract patterns and meaning.
Digital tools have made this easier than ever. Podcasts like ours, YouTube videos, streaming services, and language learning apps can create a portable immersion environment even if you don't live in an English-speaking country.
The second principle is spaced repetition. Our brains are designed to forget information that doesn't seem important, so reviewing materials at strategic intervals is crucial for retention.
Exactly. Modern spaced repetition systems, SRS, like Anki, or the algorithms built into apps like Memrise, optimize this process, presenting vocabulary just as you're about to forget it. This is far more efficient than random reviewing. And
the third principle is focusing on the most useful content first. The 80-20 rule, or Pareto principle, applies strongly to language learning. Roughly 20% of your efforts will yield 80% of your results if you focus on high-frequency vocabulary and patterns.
That's why starting with the 1,000 most common English words is so effective. These words make up about 75% of everyday English usage. Add the next 1,000 most frequent words, and you'll understand around 85% of common text.
The fourth principle is active recall. Passive exposure helps, but actively retrieving information from memory strengthens those neural pathways much more effectively.
And finally, there's the principle of meaningful usage. We learn and retain language better when we're using it for genuine communication rather than just studying it as an abstract system.
Now let's translate these principles into practical strategies, starting with optimizing your daily learning routine.
First, I'd recommend creating an English bubble. Surrounding yourself with the language as much as possible. Change your phone, social media, and device settings to English. Listen to English music, podcasts, and audiobooks during commutes or chores.
The key is making English a part of your daily life, rather than just something you study occasionally. This creates constant, low-pressure exposure that accumulates rapidly.
Next, implement a minimum viable study session. Even 10 to 15 minutes of focused study is valuable if you can't do more. Consistency matters more than duration. A daily 15-minute vocabulary review using spaced repetition is more effective than an occasional 2-hour cram session.
I love the concept of habit stacking for this. Attach your English practice to existing habits. Perhaps you review vocabulary while having your morning coffee, or listen to an English podcast during your commute.
When it comes to vocabulary acquisition, focusing on frequency lists is a game changer for rapid progress. Start with the 500 most common words, then expand to 1,000 and so on. Tools like word and phrase info or the Oxford 3000 can help identify these high-value targets.
And don't just memorize word lists. Instead, learn words in context through example sentences, or better yet, in phrases and collocations, words that naturally appear together. This builds not just vocabulary, but natural usage patterns.
For grammar, I recommend a just-in-time approach rather than a just-in-case approach. Learn grammatical structures as you need them for communication, focusing on patterns rather than memorizing rules.
Pattern recognition is indeed crucial. Look for formulaic sequences, those chunks of language that native speakers use as units, like, I'm looking forward to, or, would you mind if I? Learning these as chunks accelerates both comprehension and production.
Let's talk about reading strategies for rapid acquisition. Extensive reading of simpler materials is generally more effective than intensive reading of challenging texts. Graded readers are excellent for this purpose.
The narrow reading approach is particularly effective, reading multiple texts on the same topic. This naturally recycles vocabulary in different contexts, reinforcing acquisition without the frustration of constantly encountering completely new words.
For listening comprehension, podcasts designed for learners are excellent because you can often control the playback speed. Start slower, then gradually increase to natural speed as your ear adjusts.
The listen, read, listen technique can rapidly boost comprehension too. First, listen to a passage, then read the transcript to clarify what you heard. Finally, listen again with your new understanding. This creates a powerful learning loop.
Speaking practice often presents a bottleneck for rapid progress because it requires partners or classes. How can learners address this?
Language exchange platforms like Tandem or HelloTalk offer flexible practice opportunities. Just 15 to 30 minutes of conversation practice a few times weekly can dramatically accelerate your speaking development.
For those feeling shy, the shadowing technique bridges the gap between listening and speaking. You repeat along with audio, matching pronunciation and intonation. It's a form of private speaking practice that builds muscle memory and confidence.
Another approach is recording yourself speaking, then comparing with native models. This self-feedback loop develops awareness of your patterns and progress.
Writing often gets neglected in discussions of fast learning, but it's actually a powerful tool for consolidation because it's inherently slower and more deliberate than speaking.
Keeping a daily English journal, even just a few sentences, provides regular production practice and creates a record of your progress. Writing forces you to retrieve vocabulary and apply grammar rules, strengthening those neural pathways.
For those seeking feedback, platforms like Lang 8 or writing exchanges on Reddit can connect you with native speakers who will review your writing.
Let's address some common obstacles to rapid progress and how to overcome them.
The first is the intermediate plateau, that frustrating period where progress seems to stall despite continued effort. This happens partly because the initial gains from learning high-frequency words and basic grammar are behind you.
To break through this plateau, diversify your input sources and increase complexity gradually. Also, start specializing in content relevant to your specific goals, whether that's business English, academic writing, or casual conversation.
Another common obstacle is limited practice time. For busy learners, the key is maximizing efficiency rather than trying to find more hours in the day.
Microlearning is effective here. 5-minute vocabulary reviews while waiting in line, listening practice during commutes, language learning apps during breaks. These small sessions add up surprisingly quickly when they're consistent.
Perfectionism can also slow progress. Many learners hesitate to speak or write until they feel ready, but this delays the very practice that builds proficiency.
Adopt what polyglots call the day one principle. Start using the language from day one, even with just a few words. Embrace errors as part of the learning process, rather than signs of failure.
Motivation issues often arise when progress seems slow. How can learners maintain the motivation needed for consistent practice?
Setting concrete, achievable milestones helps, perhaps understanding a YouTube video without subtitles or having a 5-minute conversation. These visible wins fuel continued effort.
Tracking progress explicitly also helps. Whether through language apps that show your growing vocabulary, recording speaking samples monthly to hear your improvement, or keeping a learning journal, seeing your progress maintains motivation.
Finding community is another powerful motivator. Whether online or in person, connecting with fellow English learners provides accountability, shared resources, and emotional support.
Let's talk about leveraging technology for accelerated learning, because digital tools can significantly streamline the process.
Spaced repetition apps like Anki or Memrise optimize vocabulary review, ensuring you focus on words you're most likely to forget.
AI-powered language partners like ChatGPT or language-specific AI companions can provide unlimited conversation practice, explanations, and corrections. While they don't replace human interaction, they remove the scheduling and availability barriers.
Text-to-speech and speech recognition technologies allow for pronunciation practice with immediate feedback, even without a human teacher present.
Language learning analytics tools can identify patterns in your errors, helping you focus remediation efforts where they'll have the greatest impact.
Let's wrap up with a 30-day acceleration plan for listeners who want to jumpstart their English learning.
Week 1 focuses on building your daily learning habit and English environment. Change device settings to English, install key apps, and establish a minimum 15-minute daily study routine focused on high-frequency vocabulary.
Week 2 introduces active production. Begin daily writing of at least 3 to 5 sentences, start shadowing practice with short audio clips, and schedule your first language exchange or tutor session.
Week 3 expands your input sources to include native content. Begin with short YouTube videos on familiar topics. Use the listen, read, listen technique with podcasts, and start a narrow reading project on a topic that interests you.
Week 4 focuses on consolidation and assessment. Review your progress, identify gaps, adjust your learning system based on what's working, and set specific goals for the coming months.
Throughout this process, remember that fast doesn't mean instant. The goal is steady, efficient progress without wasted effort, not unrealistic overnight transformations.
Let's summarize the key takeaways for our listeners who want to accelerate their English learning.
First, create an immersive English environment. Even if you don't live in an English-speaking country, digital tools make this more possible than ever.
Second, prioritize high-frequency vocabulary and patterns using spaced repetition systems to optimize retention.
Third, balance input, reading, listening, with output, speaking, writing daily, even if just for a few minutes.
Fourth, embrace good enough in your production. Waiting until you feel ready only delays progress.
And finally, be consistent but patient. Language acquisition is a cumulative process. Small daily efforts compound into remarkable progress over time.
That brings us to the end of today's episode on how to learn English fast. We hope these strategies help you optimize your learning journey for maximum efficiency without sacrificing quality.
Thank you for listening to Artificial Fluency. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe to our podcast and share it with friends who might benefit. Until next time,
Happy learning, everyone.